The Mycenaeans stand as one of the most fascinating and enigmatic civilizations of the ancient world, a people whose legacy would echo across millennia and shape the very foundation of Greek culture and, by extension, Western civilization. To trace the origins of the Mycenaeans is to embark on a journey through myth and archaeology, through the rise of powerful cities and the forging of a unique identity in the crucible of the Late Bronze Age. But who were the Mycenaeans, and where did they come from? The answers lie scattered across the windswept hills of southern Greece, buried deep within the ruins of mighty citadels, and preserved in the faded lines of ancient tablets and the enduring tales of Homer. The story of the Mycenaeans begins in the 3rd millennium BCE, when the southern Greek mainland, known as the Peloponnese, was home to a patchwork of small farming communities. These early inhabitants, often referred to as the early Helladic people, practiced agriculture, animal husbandry, and simple crafts. Over the centuries, these communities grew in size and complexity, absorbing influences from neighboring regions and gradually evolving toward more sophisticated forms of social organization. By the middle of the 2nd millennium BCE, around 1700 to 1600 BCE, a dramatic transformation was underway. New waves of people, often identified by scholars as Indo-European speakers, began to migrate into mainland Greece from the north. These newcomers brought with them not only new languages, but also advancements in technology, including the use of horses and chariots, and new social structures that emphasized leadership by warrior kings. Over time, these groups intermixed with the indigenous populations, giving rise to a new cultural synthesis. The Mycenaeans, named after their most famous city, Mycenae, the Mycenaeans established a network of powerful centers across southern Greece, places like Tiryns, Pylos, Thebes, and Athens. Each city was ruled by a wanax, or king, who presided over a hierarchical society of nobles, craftsmen, farmers, and laborers. At the heart of each city stood a massive citadel, crowned by megaron halls and ringed by cyclopean walls, so called because later Greeks believed only giants could have moved such enormous stones. The Mycenaeans were not isolated in their citadels. They were deeply engaged with the wider world. Their wealth and power derived in large part from trade. They exported olive oil, wine, and pottery, and imported precious metals, luxury goods, and ideas from across the Mediterranean. Archaeological discoveries reveal their connections with Minoan Crete to the south, the Hittite Empire in Anatolia, the cities of Egypt, and as far afield as the Levant and even Italy. Mycenaean pottery has been found in shipwrecks off the coast of Turkey and in the ruins of ancient cities in the Near East, a testament to their far-reaching influence. But what set the Mycenaeans apart from their contemporaries? One key feature was their adoption and adaptation of writing. The Mycenaeans used a script known as Linear B, an early form of Greek adapted from the Linear A script of the Minoan Civilization on Crete. Clay tablets inscribed with Linear B have been discovered in the ruins of palaces at Pylos, Knossos, and Mycenae itself. These tablets reveal a highly organized administrative system, with records detailing everything from allocations of grain and livestock to inventories of weapons and lists of people serving in the palace bureaucracy. Through these documents, we catch glimpses of daily life in Mycenaean Greece, a world of farmers and herders, artisans and traders, slaves and soldiers, all working under the watchful eye of the palace elite. The Mycenaeans also left behind a rich material culture: gold funerary masks, exquisitely crafted weapons and armor, jewelry, frescoes, and pottery decorated with scenes of war, hunting, and religious ritual. The most famous of these treasures is the so-called Mask of Agamemnon, unearthed by the archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann in the late 19th century. A golden death mask that, whether or not it belonged to the legendary king of Homeric epic, speaks to the wealth and artistry of the Mycenaean world. Religion was central to Mycenaean life. The Mycenaeans worshipped a pantheon of gods and goddesses, many of whose names, such as Zeus, Hera, Poseidon, and Athena, would later appear in the classical Greek religion. Shrines and ritual objects found at Mycenaean sites suggest that religious ceremonies were conducted both within the palace and at remote mountain sanctuaries. Sacrifice, feasting, and processions played an important role, binding the community together and reinforcing the authority of the king and his court. War was never far from the minds of the Mycenaeans. Their citadels were designed as fortresses, with massive gates and secret escape tunnels, and their art is filled with images of chariots, warriors, and battles. The Mycenaeans were skilled fighters, and their armies were organized and equipped with bronze weapons, chariots, and distinctive boar's tusk helmets. The epic tales preserved by Homer, though written centuries after the fall of Mycenaean civilization, reflect an enduring memory of these warrior kings and their heroic deeds. The most famous of these legends is, of course, the story of the Trojan War, a mythic conflict between the Greeks and the city of Troy that may have its roots in real struggles for power and trade in the Aegean and Anatolian worlds. But what of the origins of the Mycenaeans themselves? Archaeological and genetic evidence suggests that the Mycenaeans emerged from a complex interplay of indigenous Aegean populations and incoming Indo-European migrants. Studies of ancient DNA from Mycenaean skeletons reveal a genetic profile that is closely related to that of the Minoans of Crete, with additional elements from populations further north and east. This genetic mixture reflects the dynamic and interconnected world of the Bronze Age Eastern Mediterranean, where peoples and cultures mingled and exchanged ideas, technologies, and genes. The Mycenaeans' adoption of Minoan cultural elements, such as writing, artistic styles, and religious practices, was not simply a case of imitation. Rather, the Mycenaeans took these influences and made them their own, blending them with their own traditions and innovations. The result was a distinctive Mycenaean culture, characterized by its monumental architecture, its militaristic ethos, and its complex administrative system. The Mycenaean world reached its zenith between roughly 1400 and 1200 BCE, a period marked by prosperity, ambitious building projects, and expanding influence. Mycenaean rulers sent envoys and traded with the great powers of the age, and their ships plied the waters of the Aegean, Adriatic, and beyond. Yet, this golden age was not to last. Around the end of the 13th century BCE, the Mycenaean centers began to decline. The reasons for this collapse remain a subject of debate among scholars. Some point to internal factors, such as social unrest, economic difficulties, or dynastic struggles, while others emphasize external pressures, including invasions, natural disasters, or the wider wave of upheaval that swept across the eastern Mediterranean at the end of the Bronze Age. By around 1100 BCE, the great palaces of Mycenaean Greece lay in ruins. The administrative systems that had sustained them vanished, and much of the population either dispersed into smaller rural communities or migrated to new lands. The art of writing was lost, and with it, the detailed records of Mycenaean society. For centuries, Greece entered a so-called Dark Age, a period of relative obscurity in the historical record. Yet, the memory of the Mycenaeans endured. The ruins of their citadels inspired awe in later generations, and the tales of their heroes, Agamemnon, Menelaus, Achilles, Odysseus, were passed down in epic poetry and song. When the Greeks of the classical age looked back at their past, they saw the Mycenaeans as their heroic ancestors, the founders of their civilization, and the first to unite the Greek world in great deeds and epic struggles. In the modern era, the rediscovery of the Mycenaeans began with the excavations of Heinrich Schliemann at Mycenae and Troy, and continued with the work of archaeologists at sites like Pylos, Tiryns, and Thebes. The decipherment of Linear B in the 1950s revealed that the language of the Mycenaeans was an early form of Greek, confirming the deep roots of Greek culture in the Bronze Age. Excavations have unearthed new treasures and new questions, shedding light on the everyday lives of the Mycenaeans and their connections to the wider world. Today, the story of the Mycenaeans is still being written. Each new discovery adds another piece to the puzzle, helping us to understand how this remarkable civilization rose from the mists of prehistory to leave a lasting mark on the world. The Mycenaeans were not just the stuff of legend. They were real people, living in a dynamic and challenging age, whose achievements laid the groundwork for the flowering of Greek culture in the centuries to come. In tracing the origins of the Mycenaeans, we see the interplay of migration and innovation, of adaptation and ambition. We see a people who built mighty citadels and complex societies, who traded and fought and worshipped, who remembered their past and dreamed of greatness. Their story is our story, a chapter in the long and ongoing saga of human civilization. A reminder that even in the distant past, the seeds of future greatness are sown.